Trip, my first question is, what do you know now that you wish you would have known then?
Don't have so much anxiety about making it, because it'll happen, and also don't have anxiety about people who leapfrog ahead of you super fast, because you'll get there eventually. And actually, if you go at your own pace and learn what you need to learn and do what you need to do, it'll happen.
So that's a mantra that you are still doing?
A little bit, yeah, for sure. I think so. I think, listening to my own impulses about what I respond to in terms of the material I get to direct or decide to direct and all that kind of stuff is useful.
This is a great segue. What attracts you to a piece in the first place? What's the primary thing?
It can be a million different things, but it has to be something that as I'm reading it, I instinctively start to visualize it in my head. If I can do that immediately, then I know it's something that I could potentially be right for as a director. But it can range from anything from that to something that's so profoundly challenging and difficult and terrifying because I would have no idea how to do it. That actually is also a motivating factor. And then,
give me an example of that you did that you were just absolutely terrified. I mean, was punk rock? Was punk rock?
Punk rock was not. No, not necessarily. I think punk rock I immediately had a kind of visceral emotional connection to. Let's see. There's a million different examples, but a play that I did many, many years ago called Arabian Night by a German writer named Roland Schimmelpfennig, wherein the entire play is articulated inner monologue. Oh, wow. And it's all set in this sort of low-income housing in Berlin, in this one apartment building. You see all the different. I had no idea how to activate that and make that feel dramatic because it was so interior. And
the actors spoke these interior monologues-ish?
Yeah. And they're also narrating their action constantly. So you can't, to me that was a huge question, is you can't stage it wherein the performer is physically doing the exact same thing that they're saying, because that would be redundant and boring and non-dramatic. So what was the physical vocabulary that I could impose upon the piece that would illuminate theme, character, situation, story, that wasn't in a one-to-one correspondence with what they were actually talking about as they were narrating the.
You might say to the actor, mix a drink when you are talking about, or.
Maybe, or it was actually much more abstract than that. It was like, find a gesture that was, would be what this character would do when they woke up in the morning, and then, and then repeat it 20 times. It was like very avant-garde.
Where did you learn to do that? The gesture work. Did you study?
I went. My training is from the Yale School of Drama as a director. But really, to me, the biggest tool in my arsenal is instinct and impulse. So it was something that I just thought of that might be the right path.
So you went to Yale.
I did.
And did you graduate? Yes.
I didn't.
Why? What happened?
I got a job. My third year, which is your last year at the drama school, I assisted Joe Mantello on Take Me Out at the Public, at the Donmar, and then on Broadway. And then I assisted Mike Nichols on HBO's Angels in America. And then right after that, from my thesis production at Yale, which was A Streetcar Named Desire, I got a job. I got a job directing a play called The Last Sunday in June, which was my first show in New York and was a hit and transferred off Broadway, and so I just never went back. I just didn't finish. Sorry, that's like a terrible thing to say in a school, but I actually joined a long list of very, very distinguished theater practitioners from the Yale School of Drama who never got their MFA certificate, so woohoo. But it just means I could never teach, I think, at a graduate level,
yes,
maybe?
You can.
I can. Okay, great. So it means nothing that I didn't get my MFA.
What? Mike Nichols, what did you learn from him? Oh my
God, everything. He was the greatest. human, the most wonderful director. I learned so much. I think the thing I learned the most is that are anyone directors in the audience? Okay, great. So the thing that like as a young director, I think one's impulse is to like muscle and control the process from start to finish and really like feel like you're working. And we did I did two things with Mike. The first was The Seagull in Central Park with Phil Hoffman and Natalie Portman and Kevin Kline and Meryl Streep and Chris Walken and Marcia Gay Harden and I mean the list, John Goodman. I mean it was just the most insane cast you've ever, crazy cast. And the first 2.5 weeks of rehearsal, we all sat around a table and talked, but not about the play, not about the characters, not about anything. And I just kept on being like, TikTok, what the hell are you doing, Mike? It was amazing conversations, but I was like, what the hell is going on? And then only sort of retrospectively, I realized, oh, he was creating trust and he was creating intimacy and he was creating a family in a story about a family, you know? So I thought that was kind of amazing. It was just that lesson of just sort of relax and don't try to muscle through the process and try to be open to what was happening in the room. I had a great experience on that show because I found Stanislavski's Reggie Book, which I don't know if you guys know what that is, but a Reggie Book is like his notes. You have the script on one side and then almost like footnoted, here's where I think Arkadina should turn to go, and Treplev grabs her petticoats and holds on. You know, it's basically all of his staging ideas as he was preparing to do the show. So I found it, and then I had it translated into English, and then I would sit in rehearsal, and he would be working, and he would just be like, "So what does Stanislavski do in this moment?" And I would like find it, and then I would let him know, and then he would make a decision. Oh, well, that was a good idea. Maybe I'll try that, or maybe I don't want to do that. And so it was sort of fascinating because I was sort of learning that play via Stanislavski and Mike Nichols, which was kind of not a terrible way to learn about The Seagull.
This is a story, I was just wondering if it's true, that Mike would sit there and watch rehearsal, and Meryl would say, should I do, what if I do this? I mean, she was very much a part of staging herself, or?
It was so fascinating, first of all, to be 4 feet away from Meryl Streep in a rehearsal room was crazy pants. But like she would do things like, you know that moment in The Seagull where she's like, I'm fit as a fiddle, and you don't, and she does a cartwheel or whatever. So one day in rehearsal, she like did the cartwheel, and then she went, like that. The entire stage management team like jumped up, ran over to her, and she was like, I'm acting, you know? And then she would do amazing things in performance with Phil. The bandage wrapping scene where Arkadina slaps Treplev. One night she would slap him. One night she would do that, and he would go like that, and then she would say, no, I'm not going to slap. And then one night she would do that, and then do it. You know, every night it was totally different, and so it was great because it kept Phil not knowing what the hell was going to happen at that moment. So it was real every night.
Yes.
So.
Well, you started as an actor, Trip.
I did.
And do you think that helped you be such a good director?
Oh, that's sweet of you to say that. It definitely helped. Whether a good director or not, it definitely helped.
Because?
Because my impulse to become a director was based on the fact that I would be directed by directors and think they have no idea how to talk to actors. And so, I knew I could do that better. So I wasn't that great an actor, so I think the ability to really have a kind of intuitive, empathetic relationship to an actor and an actor's process is maybe one of the most invaluable tools in my arsenal.
So you think that the director should take acting lessons?
Yeah, I do, and I think, that's what, at the drama school, at Yale Drama, one of the greatest things about that program is that the directing program, you take acting with the actors, design with the designers, dramaturgy with the dramaturgs. You are intimately involved in every single aspect of the theater.
You have to do it.
And you have to do it, yeah, you have to make a little model of a set, and you have to you know,
Wow.
be in a scene
Yeah.
for scene study class. Oh God, that was horrible.
Do you, do you remember the scenes that you worked on? That was.
There were, it was over 2 years, so there was a lot, yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember a time when you were being directed by somebody as an actor or in a play, and you thought to yourself, I could do a better job. I would know what to tell this actor. I mean, because I think that actors also make the best directors, and that if they feel that a lot when they're in a production, I could do better, that they should direct.
It was a little bit of that, but I actually think that sort of more, maybe a deeper reason for me to have moved from acting to directing was that I found myself more and more interested in the macro view of the production. Like I was fascinated by how the choices in design and the choices in staging informed the way in which the story was being told. Whereas I think as an actor, that is a lovely tool to have, but I think that in some ways you have to kind of be laser focused as an advocate for the character that you're portraying. So you're not seeing, you're actually not supposed to see necessarily the forest for the trees. You're supposed to be inside it. And whereas a director, I think you're always sort of inside and outside at the same time. And I wanted to have that. I wanted to make it. I wanted to make the whole thing.
Make the whole thing.
Yeah.
You said you mentioned something about the set designer being a great dramaturg.
They are by far my favorite dramaturgs, by far.
Because
they have, in my experience, the most profound understanding of the material. Deep, profound understanding. And they are, especially when I'm working on a new play, my design collaborators are always helping me sort of unearth things that that make the staging and the mounting of the production richer.
like an architect working on a.
I mean, it's sort of extraordinary. I mean, there's lots of examples, like for instance in punk rock.
Yes.
So did anyone see that production?
Oh, I wish you had.
So
tell them what the story is, if you.
it's set in a disused library at a boarding school, a prep school in England, and it's sort
name
of
of the
become
playwright
this
is
Simon Stevens, who
Simon
wrote
Stevens.
Curious Incident.
Yeah.
So this room is sort of where these kids have decided to like kind of congregate when they're in between classes and stuff like that, and there's no adults, and it's just this horrifying vision of, it's very Lord of the Flies. It's just how cruel and horrific. And the play ends with this like unbelievably disturbing scene where the guy comes in and he shoots, one of the kids comes in and he shoots 4 of the other children in the room and kills them, some of them. Anyway, so I had this conceit, and I was really interested. I'm a very big, huge proponent as a director of making sure that transitions are really awesome. They're really important to me. So in the transitions in this play, I had, I decided that like a lot of it was going to be sort of subjectively through the eyes of this one character who ends up shooting these other kids and who sort of slowly loses his mind through the course of the play. And so the actors would come in these crazy masks and, you know, do stuff like throw eggs at the walls and just be it was wild. And this is a long way to get to, and one day, towards the end of the play, there's another scene where a little girl, the younger sister of one of these sort of high school age kids, comes into this library, and my costume designer, the brilliant Clint Ramos, said to me, wouldn't it be cool if she came in wearing one of the masks that you're seeing in these sort of dream transition moments? And it just throws the character for such a, because it's like something from his mind, but it's manifested real. And it was one of the most brilliant ideas I've ever been able to actually execute. I thought it was genius.
Yeah. Do you believe in improvisation? I mean, one of the things when I was seeing punk rock is I was imagining that you took them through some improvs because physically they were so wildly free and undirected, if you know what I mean.
I do believe in improvisation to a point, I have a very, very, I'm gonna give you my secrets. There is a technique that I use that's not quite improvisation, but we used a lot of in punk rock, especially in the scenes where all 7 characters were on stage at the same time. And I learned this technique from Adam Rapp, who I've directed a play of his in the past, and he learned it from Mike Lee, the genius film director and writer and playwright. And it's this. Here you go. That horrible moment when you move from table work to first standing up and you have your scripts in your hands and you haven't memorized the whole thing yet, but you're starting to stage and you, as an actor, are trying to be completely alive to your impulses and yet are tied slavishly to the script. Yes. It's a disaster, and it makes everyone hate themselves. So this is what I do. They don't bring their scripts up. I read the entire scene, all the dialogue, all of the stage directions, just me. Right. I don't look up. Right. For like 7, 8 times in a row I do that. Right. And just have the actors move through it, right. Almost like a dumb show, but it's not like they're doing a silent film, but they're just moving through it, listening to the dialogue and kind of figuring out, they're organizing themselves in space and figuring out what they're doing. And it's fantastic for actors because it alleviates that horrible moment. Plus, it helps them memorize because they start to solidify where they are at, hearing, oh, that's that line. Here is where I'm at the table. It's genius for actors. It's genius for directors because all my first impulses to start organizing people and squelching impulses and making them what I want go away because I don't look. I don't even see it for 8 times in a row. I'm just married to the page. And then so after that, after the 8 times, then I give it to the playwright if they're in the room and have the playwright say it. And that's a genius thing too because then we can kind of hear some line readings without having to say this is a line reading. Because actually, speaking of the Seagull, at the Moscow Art Theater, it was the tradition that the playwright at the first day of rehearsal would read the entire play to the company. And
that's what Arthur Miller would do.
And there you go. He learned it from Stanislavski and Chekhov. But to me, it's like, that's an amazing thing because this beautiful writer who has been, locked up in his or her room, forging this tome, with all these voices inside his or her head, it's fascinating to be able to hear that out loud and hear that unleashed into the world. And it gives actors clues, it gives directors clues about pacing, about emphasis, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, when the writer does it a couple of times and I start to watch and then I start to adjust, anyway, this is, to me, the greatest staging technique I've ever seen because it's great for large scenes with you have a lot of actors because when you're staging something and you have 7 actors on stage, it's really hard when you're starting out to be able to concentrate and pay attention to all 7 lives at the same time. And you just and it just gives actors amazing agency, which I love as well. And then, I start to shape, and oftentimes the end result when you see the production has nothing to do with, but it's an incredible, invaluable tool. So we did that, but then we did a lot of work we did a ton of table work in punk rock because the script is quite elliptical, about really forging backstories for the characters, really. And then
did you talk those out loud?
We did.
Or they went off and made them themselves?
We talked through them out loud, because there's a school of directing, which I totally admire, which is all about secrecy, write your backstory and don't tell anybody, or I have a really great friend of mine who's a brilliant director in the city, and he directs only by whispering into actors' ears, so you never hear.
That's what Kazan used to do.
Well, then this guy must have learned it there. I'm the opposite. I literally, my whole energy is like, do you like me? Do you like being here? like me? I like to.
You're in action.
It's collaboration, so I just want everyone to be involved.
Yes.
And have the same kind of feeling of stakes that I do. I think every show that I do is like I feel like it's a life or death situation.
It is, and you're creating a family for that time and space.
Yeah.
Writing a play is a lonely business and directing a play is the opposite. This is what you said. It's all about the collaboration. I don't serve writers, I collaborate with them. I love that. What was the best collaborative experience that you've had and why?
My favorite collaborative experience, I mean, that's such a tough one. A play called A Small Fire that I directed at Playwrights Horizons by Adam Bach. It's an extraordinary play about a woman who loses her senses one by one by one by one until
Is that Laurie Metcalf? No.
It was Michelle Pock and Reed Birney played her husband, and Celia Keenan-Bolger played her daughter. It was an amazing experience, and the last scene of the play, she only has her sense of touch left, and she's really considering that's it. I don't want to live anymore. It's so awful. And in this moment of like naked, raw despair, she and her husband make love. It's a wordless scene. And at the end of the very last moment of the play I'm going to get emotional thinking about it. She says, I felt all of that, and that's enough. She basically, I'm paraphrasing, but she basically says, because they were so connected, she makes the decision that's enough for her to continue. It's an amazing play. It's an amazing play. So that was an extraordinary experience. You know, collaborating with Reed and Michelle, who are actors in their 50s, both got completely naked and did this really intense sex scene that was not about sex as much as it was about connection. And that was an extraordinary collaboration. A play called Bachelorette by Leslie Headland that I directed a lot of years ago. That was an amazing show because it was so intense with how cruel the characters were to each other, but how much fun we had doing it. Punk rock was amazing. I mean, there's so many.
What happens if it's a sexual scene?
I love staging sex scenes. I love it.
You do?
I do.
I was going to say, how hard is that? And what if there's no connection, but suddenly the actors, there's no chemistry, or they're shy, or you can't?
Well, if you have no chemistry, then the whole show is fucked. if it's characters who are supposed to have chemistry. So the last Hallie Pfeiffer play that I directed was a play called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Gynecologic Oncology Unit at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center of New York City. That was the whole title of the play. And it's a play in which two young people, a young woman and a sort of not quite as young man, are in a hospital room, a double hospital room, and they're both taking care of their moms who are suffering from ovarian cancer. And they meet and kind of fall in love with each other. And there's this scene where they finally make out and in the bathroom, and they decide to go to the bathroom to make out. And I said to Hallie, you know, making out is not enough. He should go down on her. It's a much more intense, shocking thing to have happen in the bathroom of a hospital room with your mothers in the next, right there. And so it was so much fun because it became sort of the comic apex of the play. And anyway, I don't know why I said I love staging sex scenes, but I was asking
about sexual, if the actors can't do it, if they're too shy. I mean,
most actors I think are okay with. I mean, they're so exposed emotionally.
Do you do exercises with them, or do you say,
no.
let's try?
No, actually, it's the opposite. When you're doing like a proper sex scene, you have to be super technical first. It's literally like a fight scene. It's like fight choreography. I think that helps if you do it very technically first. And
that's interesting. I never heard that before. Yeah. Okay, casting. Oh, wait. You create a playlist of songs.
I do. I
want to hear about that.
So I do a lot of different things prep-wise for a production, but one of them is because I'm obsessed with music, I create a playlist. So I read a play several times and I start to, it may just be the kinds of songs I'm listening to at the moment that I think relate, but I always create a playlist so that when I'm then going back through the play many hundreds of times in preparation for a production, I'm listening, and sometimes those songs make it into the transition music and sometimes they don't at all. With that play, with Hallie's play, the last play, for sure it did. Hallie and I actually, together we went to the Sufjan Stevens concert at King's Theater, which is, anyone been there? It's the greatest place to see music now in New York City. It's so good. It's deep, deep, deep into Brooklyn.
It's in Flatbush.
Flatbush, yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful space. Anyway, his last album is an album called Carrie and Lowell, which is about his very, very screwed up relationship with his mother, who was bipolar and schizophrenic. And this play very much was about, children and mothers. So the entire transition musical landscape became Sufjan's, that album. So stuff like that.
Do you play the music with the actors in the room? I mean, do you?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
It helps
for sure.
inform them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Punk rock was another one where it's like you definitely played
You had to.
and figuring out the playlist for that show was super fun. Anyway.
I think it's great for the actors to have music too.
Totally.
You've done musicals.
I have.
When casting, do you err on the side of the person who has the great voice or the great actor?
Great question. Here's I'm going to sort of invert it. I will say a couple things about this. One is musical theater actors are awesome, and I love casting them in plays. I do that all the time. I've given a lot of musical theater actors their first break as straight play actors, and it's a travesty that doesn't happen more often. There's like, if you look, Celia Keenan Bolger in Bachelorette, Lindsay Mendez in Significant Other, Bobby Steggert in Assistants, and the list goes on and on and on of people who I think are tremendous actors who've never done plays before, who I cast in plays. All right, now the reverse to talk about. So, if theater's collaboration, casting for if theater's collaboration, musical is like collaboration on steroids. Like it's just the most collaborative thing I've ever done. And when you're casting a musical, you can't just make that decision, I just want to go with a great actor, because you're not making all the decisions. You have a composer who is going to tell you if that person can't sing that song, they cannot be cast in that role. So it's just collaboration and compromise is constantly an operation on a musical. I will say that I guess the reason why I said that about musical theater actors is because musical theater actors are really, really good. I've found. No, I'm saying, so I've found that in casting musicals, and I have 2 musicals I'm doing next season and stuff like that, I don't have to compromise one way or the other. It's like extraordinary that they have amazing voices, and they're great actors, the ones that I'm working with. So I don't ever feel like I have to choose voice over acting or acting over voice with music with the actors I have.
Do you like auditioning?
I find auditioning excruciating because I'm such a lover of actors that I know how hard it is for them. That being said, it teaches me so much about the play. So I love it for that more than anything else. The thing that I hate about auditions is that a lot of directors treat them as what are you gonna do for me? Show me what you can do. Have actors come in and sort of try to give their opening night performance. To me, what an audition is about is can we work together? What is our vibe? Do I like the vibe that this actor is giving, and am I excited to get in there and try to figure stuff out with them? So
You give them direction. I mean, obviously, if somebody interests you,
you have to,
you give them direction right there.
Yeah, but I'm investigating whether it would be fun for us to collaborate together.
Yeah. Like a first date, in a way.
In some ways, yeah.
Do you give callbacks? Do you have,
Sure.
Yeah. Let's say you're calling me back for something. What are you now looking for in the callback? Something completely different of something that I didn't do
think a
before?
lot of times-
Should I wear the same clothes?
I don't care about what people wear to auditions, really, unless, I don't care if they wear the same thing again. That stuff doesn't. I hate that some people say to me, some casters, she's dark-haired and you want a blonde, don't you? And I'm like, well, no, I don't care. I want a good actor and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that a callback situation is a question of repeatability, right? I do think that when you get to this level of a callback, what what the actor is being asked to do is show that that one audition that you fell in love with was not a fluke, that they can repeat what they did.
Not repeat exactly, though.
No, but like dazzle you again. Dazzle you even
again.
more.
Dazzle you even more.
Yeah, I think that's
the
important.
second date.
Yeah, yeah.
What if a writer has written a role for a certain actor and you have other ideas? Like the playwright says to you, I wrote
Great.
this.
I think that happens all the time. Yeah.
And they say, yes.
It's my job to persuade the writer that they're wrong. No, kidding. No, but there are, for instance, I mean, there's lots of things politically that are really complicated about this. For instance, I did a play with a writer named Paul Weitz, who's a wonderful filmmaker and playwright, and he had written this role for a kind of like privileged Upper East Side, moneyed woman, and I really wanted to cast this actress, Maureen Sebastian, who I think is wonderful, and he was like, well, she's Asian, and I was like, yeah. He's like, I never thought of that role as, like, she's a rich Upper East Side woman. I was like, there's no, what are you talking about? So I had to kind of I had to bring him along. I like casting plays that reflect my experience of the world, and as I go through my day, I'm not seeing all white people all the time. Thank God, I have had to do that with writers in terms of that specifically. Yes. In terms of what their if a writer is very set on an actor, I also listen to that very closely because a specific actor, because a lot of times it's about how the rhythm of their writing, they like to hear it a specific way because the rhythm that specific actor is delivering it is helpful. So, but it's always a push and pull. And
do you feel a political obligation as a director, a responsibility in a political sense to, I mean, you started to talk about that, to bring certain actors to. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I do that with every single play that I do, for sure.
How do you feel about playwright stage directions for actors? Uta Hagen, who was my teacher and mentor, used to say that when she was doing Blanche, which she did a lot in, what was the name of that? Streetcar.
Yeah.
She said that, so Tennessee Williams wrote in the margin, Blanche like a moth to light.
Totally.
And she said that every time she got to that line, she felt she had to do this, like a moth to light. She couldn't get it out of her head.
He's a tricky one, Williams, with stage directions. I just did The Rose Tattoo this summer at Williamstown Theater Festival with Marissa Tomei. She was amazing. And
who played
Alvaro?
Yes.
Chris Abbott, who was also amazing.
Chris, he was here. He was a student of mine.
Oh, cool.
Isn't he wonderful?
He's a brilliant actor.
A sweetheart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sweetheart, yeah.
And anyway, we were doing I was not doing a regional theater musty museum production of The Rose Tattoo. I was doing a very muscular production of it, and I found those stage directions to be treacherous. But I don't.
You didn't pay attention to them.
No, I definitely do. I think that's how I approach it. I read them assiduously and then decide whether I want to do them or not, or ignore them. But I don't like, go through a play and black out all of the stage directions and be like, no. I think a lot of times writers, when they're writing stage directions, they're giving really important information to actors, directors, set designers, for sure.
Yes.
So I think they can be very important. And lots of times I do plays like Small Fire, where the entire last scene is one stage direction. They make love, and then so it's up to me. How? And if I had just, exactly. So if I had just X'd it out, then there would be no ending to the play. So.
Describe your first meeting with a new writer.
That is really like a date, more than an audition. That is a real date, 100%. Josh Harmon and I met at a Pan Quotidien on the Upper West Side.
What did you eat?
Exactly. We shared a chocolate chip cookie. And,
that's a good beginning.
I think it's huge. It's huge. That is an audition. That's a director's audition, right? Yeah. Because the writer's written the play. The play is getting done by the Roundabout Theater Company at the Lower Pels over the summer. he's interested in you. Josh is interested in me to direct it. I don't know why I'm putting everything in the second person. But so it's a little bit like, for me, it feels like an audition. But to me, you listen like crazy, which I think is a good technique for a date too, right? You want to like listen to the person that you're on a date with. You ask a gajillion questions, which I also think is a good thing to date advice, right? I always love doing that regardless, and when I'm interacting with other humans, is like I kind of don't love having the spotlight on me and talking about myself, so I always reverse the conversation to be about the other person. It's extremely important, and because I think you're feeling out whether we're gonna fit, whether we're a good fit or not. I'll tell you this: I don't talk about ideas in the first meeting.
Okay.
I don't. Mm-mm. I talk about the play. I talk about like where that play came from for you. Where did that play come from for you? What were you interested in? What made you write it? How long did it take you to write it? Are you satisfied with? I ask all the questions of the writer. I'm not there to be like, here's how I see. I hate that. I would never do that, because how dare I come into something that this person's been living with for sometimes more than a year, and start to impose that comes later. When I start to I have to be invited to be able to shape a piece. Right. I don't think that the first meeting is about that. And I think for me, it's really important information gathering.
Is the playwright in the room with you all during rehearsals? Is there a time when you want the playwright to leave now already? And
sometimes playwrights are really busy because you can't make a living writing a play off Broadway. So sometimes they're busy with their Netflix series that they're in the writer's room for, or whatnot. So they can't always be around. I'm not the kind of director who asks the playwright to leave the room. I like having a playwright there.
Has the playwright ever given the actors direction?
Sometimes.
And do you mind that?
Not all the time. No, it depends. If I have like with Adam Bach, we're very simpatico. We have the exact same ideas and thoughts. I let him talk, or Leslie Headland, I let her talk. Now, the only time I will ask a playwright to leave for a specific is if I sense that the actor is, I think acting is the hardest thing to do in the world. I think that like, you can't have two mommies or daddies. You need one person telling you yes or no. You can't have two. So I think like if an actor starts, I see to have like a meltdown about too much feedback or too much, or if I and the actor start to feel like, oh God, what we're doing is trying to please the writer in a rehearsal process, that's when I think saying, you know what, let us be terrible for a while, and then we'll show you what we have. But we should feel not like, when you're working with a great writer, sometimes you feel you can get frozen as an actor or a director because you're trying to please this great writer and be as good as you think the writer is, instead of like allowing yourself to be terrible, because you should. The writer when he or she was first writing the play was like, I'm sure not great. Took them years to get to perfect the play and enough to get it into a rehearsal room. So that's the time when I think maybe it's better to not have the writer there.
Do you give line readings? Do you ever give a line reading?
I have, yeah, sometimes, yeah. Not even couch. Sometimes I just like put
Put the emphasis on this word.
Put the emphasis on this word, exactly. Yeah. I don't have any. I don't think that's that big a deal.
When do you stop giving notes? I mean, we're in previews. Let's say you have 2 weeks. Every night you give notes in previews, right?
100%, yeah.
And then after it opens, then do you stick around? Do you?
I come back like once every week or once every 2 weeks.
Do you surprise them, or?
I do surprise them. I do that for sure. Plays, especially when they have a longer run, can really slip from its shape, the shape that the director creates. So you have to maintain. And sometimes you have a great stage manager who could do that for you, and sometimes you need to come back a lot. My favorite thing though is like for instance, this happened on Significant Other in its run at the Pels, which was like a 3.5-month run. I went out of town to do a musical at Williamstown, and then I came back and I just made it for the last performance, and the quality of the acting had deepened so beautifully. You just knew that like these people had formed this, you know, it's a play about friendship, so it's like they were you just believed every second of those. I love that experience.
Give some advice to these directors.
Oh shit. It's kind of miserable to start out as a director. It's horrifying. Sorry. I'm just going to be honest. Because if you're an actor, at least you can audition and someone can evaluate your work. If you're a writer, you can write something and someone can read it and evaluate your work. It's a horrific catch-22 as a director because you can't get work done unless someone hires you, but no one's going to hire you unless they see your work. So you're just in this horrific, catch-22. So I'm just before the generation that really started to do this, but I think a lot of people who I truly admire, like Alex Timbers, I think is a wonderful director. He made a DIY approach to that. You know, he started a theater company and made big splashes that way. So that's one way to bypass that loop that I was talking about. Just do it yourself. Yeah. If you want people to see your work, make it happen. That's a nightmare because then you're spending so much time producing. But that can be a very useful, valuable experience too. So I didn't do that. But I did a lot of other stuff. The thing that I think is the most important thing that I did was I never went like this and be like, when is it going to happen for me? I just constantly went out and did things. The Soho Rep Writer Directors Lab, going to New Dramatists and going through the shelves at New Dramatists and reading plays. And if I liked a play, I would leave a note in a Playwrights box. Does everyone know what a New Dramatist is? Okay. Going to Williamstown a lot as a peon, where you're basically slave labor. You pay them, but I was directing Catherine Hahn in fringe shows when she was an apprentice, and my sets for those shows were made by David Corins, and they were lit by Ben Stanton. And these are people who I still work with to this day. You know, people who are my people. And so I found that's another thing. Find your people is a huge important thing. But really, cultivate relationships with playwrights, because that is the way in which you'll get produced first. Very rarely, as an emerging director, as a just starting out director, is a theater going to be like, here's a slot for you, what do you want to do, right? That's never going to happen. What they're going to do is they're going to find a play that they want to do, and if it so happens that you're attached, the playwright says, this is my person, then you'll get the job. Like, for instance, like when the only time that's sort of like almost been like that for me is that when I, for instance, did one of my very first shows was a play called Swimming in the Shallows by Adam Bach at Second Stage Uptown. I brought the play to Carol and Chris, but it wasn't like they were holding that slot for me. You know what I mean? I brought this play to them, they fell in love with the play, they decided to produce it. A million different things. Someone who I have to fall in love a little bit, like actually in love, and become obsessed with that person, for sure. And that has happened a lot. But I also think, you know, someone who is fun to be in the room with, who has an extraordinary work ethic, who is constantly surprising me, who is pushing me as a director, who is relentlessly inventive, and always shows up and is present. It's always different depending on the piece. I'm prepping 3 shows right now that will all happen with some overlap starting in December, God help me. And they're also different, you know, like one is a play set in an incredibly impoverished section of London, and the characters are two 16-year-old kids and a 13-year-old kid and an alcoholic mother And just researching that world is a lot of prep work. And then just researching like all the idioms and figuring out like how to make sure that that translates. One character has a Welsh accent. Oh my God, it's gonna be so hard. And then I'm remounting Significant Other for Broadway, and then I'm doing another show on Broadway in the late spring, which I can't say what it is, but it's the very first revival of it since its original production in the early 90s. So all of my ways into those shows are super, super different. I do think like listening to music, I do a lot of, I was an art history major in college. I do a lot of thinking about art and looking at art and photography especially. I do a lot of talking to, the most important thing I think for me for sure is talking to the playwright if they're alive and participating, and talking to the designers, the design process. No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so because I think that like, you know, if one is just a director who's just really good at talking to actors, you're not gonna be a good director. You have to be a director who's really good at talking to actors, really has a genius visual sense, has a great sense of music, has a great sense of how to tell a story, is a great editor and dramaturg. So again, it's like you got to have the whole, I think you have to be someone who has a whole package.
Do you find that you need to prepare more as you get older?
Well, this is something I learned from Mike Nichols. You prepare like crazy and then you throw it all out. You don't think about it. That's what I do these days. So like, I don't go into a room with all my preparation and therefore the life gets sucked out of it, of a process. You prepare like crazy and then you just trust that that'll be there in your body and your subconscious, and then you don't worry about it. It's not like you're taking, again, that's the thing. It's like you're not taking a test. It's not a test. You're making art. So.
That's a perfect way to end.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Trip. Thank you.
Thank you.